afternoon. And folks in the back hear me okay? Really? Okay, that's great. Is that Bruce? Hey, Bruce. Hi, everybody. My name is Fabionar. I am the director of the Hub, which is this campus's Center for Diversity. We do a lot of work around social justice, inclusivity, leadership development, and I'm really pleased to be here today. I'm going to be talking or facilitating a little bit around understanding yourself and how it relates to leadership. In my experience, leadership is a very intimate and nuanced endeavor. It's ongoing, and so is understanding yourself. And by intimate, it means that we're in relationship with something, right? That we seek to know something, that we're close to it, right? And sometimes being intimate with things can be very beautiful, and sometimes it can be scary. And I think ultimately as a leader, we explore the intimacy and nuance of being in relationship to whatever the community is that we're a part of leadership that's emerging. Does that make sense? Okay. Wow, got really, really quiet. That's good.
Makes sense.
That makes sense. Good. One of the things in your book, one of the concepts in your book I'd like to bring into practice right now, the leadership that I like to do is some of the leadership practices that I like to engage in are how do we learn in the moment, how to be really, really present with our experience, and how do we begin to experiment with some of these ideas that we're learning or coming across in lifetime. And so one of the processes or practices that was mentioned in your books was this notion of mindfulness. Right? Those folks who are able to read or skim the chapter might have come across mindfulness as a practice that many leaders or many communities of leaders engage in. So I'm gonna guide you in a little bit of an awareness practice. So I'm gonna ask you to put your phones down and put them away. Just because for me, as somebody who's speaking and taking time to engage you and be with you, it's distracting to me. I understand that generationally it might be different. It's definitely different from me as a Generation X to constantly be in touch with that type of relationship to my technology and media. But as a speaker, it feels like there's less presence in the space. And I think right now when we talk about understanding ourselves, we want to bring more and more presence to ourselves, our bodies, and to the collective space. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to ask you just for the next 50 minutes or 45 minutes, however long we have, just to be really, really focused and as present and as connected to me and each other and yourselves as possible. It's interesting, just by saying that, I can feel the quality of presence deepen. Can folks notice that? Okay, so I'm going to ask you to get comfortable. If you're slouching, sit up so you don't fall asleep. So this will take a few minutes to do. I'll shift the gum to the back of my mouth, which I shouldn't be chewing on. And I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. And I want you first to bring your awareness to the feeling of your feet on the floor. What does it feel like to have my feet on the floor? That might seem odd or obvious, but for many of us, we're not aware of our bodies. Those of us who come from a Western orientation, we live in our heads, and we're not so often in our bodies or embodied. So if you bring your attention or your awareness to your feet on the floor, what do you notice? And there's nothing in particular I'm asking you to look for. I'm just wanting you to be aware of it. Now bring your attention to the feeling of the chair underneath you. What is the feeling of the chair against your back? What is the feeling of the clothes on your skin? turn your attention to that which seems to be internal. By that I mean, are you aware of any thoughts you're having? This is strange, this is odd, this is calming, this is making me anxious, whatever they may be. You're not judging them, you're just putting your awareness there. What are you aware of? Bring your awareness to any images that might be coming up. Bring awareness to any emotions you might be having. I'm feeling calm, I'm feeling numb, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling impatient, I'm feeling bored. All those or whatever else comes up for you. Again, you're just observing it as if it were a movie. Bring your awareness to that which seems to be external, outside of yourself. What do you notice that is seemingly outside of yourself? You might be aware of the sound of my voice, the rustling of papers, the humming of the heating system. And again, you're just being aware of your environment. Now bring your awareness to the other people in the room with your eyes closed. What do you notice? Are you aware of the presence of others even with your eyes closed? Now bring your awareness back to your whole body. See what you notice. Are there parts of yourselves that are alive, that are buzzing, that are cold, that are numb? Just scan your whole body. When you're finished, slowly open your eyes. And then see if there's anything that has shifted from now. Anything that's shifted from before we did this brief awareness practice or mindfulness practice to how you feel now. There's a lot of research about mindfulness, and this is why it's included in your book around leadership, as it being something that develops your cognition, the cognitive part of your brain. Dr. Dan Siegel calls it hygiene for your brain. It's like brushing your teeth. It's keeping it clean and fresh. And interestingly enough, it also develops the part of the brain that's for empathy. So while it's an individual practice having to do with yourself and your relationship to yourself and your body, it's also develops the part of your brain that enables us to connect with others. So that's why a number of leaders from corporations to universities to sports teams to military practice of some form of awareness or mindfulness practice. So thanks for experimenting with me. I'd be curious to see if you did that for a week, 1 minute at a time, if you noticed any benefit, or even if you notice any benefit doing it for 5 minutes right now. Most students in the 20 years that I've done this feel more grounded, more calm, more present. And some notice also some anxiety because we often don't pay attention to our bodies. And we don't often pay attention to our environments. We're focused on so many different things. So leadership and understanding ourselves is an intimate and nuanced thing. So I'm going to start with a couple of stories. When I was a little boy, I would ask my dad to show me his hand. I was probably about 4. I would compare the size of mine to his before pointing to the middle of his open palm and calling it concrete. Apparently, at an even younger age, when I was about 2, my right hand and those of my dad, mom, and older brothers were dirtied with moist concrete. We had pressed our palms and written our names into wet concrete that would dry to become a walkway of our new home. So in my mind, hands would become concrete for a couple of years. And for several more, the face of home bore the emblem of our collective hands. I'm fascinated with hands. I don't know if I'm fascinated with hands. I like my hands, right? And not because I've been told that they're a big part of who I am. I see them as intimate things that are expressive, that speak to part of my identity, part of who I am. And yet, they bring me back to this time while they're distinct in myself. When I think of my hand and imprints, I go back to home, and I go back to where I first was part of my first collective, my first culture, my first community. And so I realize now when I talk to my family or see my family talk that these are my hands, and they've been shaped by the unique experiences I have as an individual, but they also come from a collective. They also come from a community. So this is a theme that we're going to touch on quite a bit today. One of my favorite photographs is a recent one, this one of my mother holding gently with both hands my boy's sweaty face during his 8th birthday party. Phoenix is his name. He sits completely still after running around the park, and he's looking directly into his grandmother's eyes, and she shares with him the reasons why he is loved. The picture captures a moment of intimate family tradition perfectly and evokes the archetype of the elder passing on their deepest wisdom, the transmission of unconditional love to a young person in need of affirmation and guidance. We are fortunate if we know the intimate experience of receiving at the hands of an elder wisdom and love, whether that experience comes from family, teachers, coaches, spiritual leaders, or community leaders. The wisdom of love need not happen through words, but its presence and transformative power are unmistakable when offered in a pure way. And when the person being offered the gift is able to receive it. And by pure, I simply mean the quality of presence on behalf of the giver is that of selfless love. Even if it is only for a moment, the intent is to truly serve the well-being of the other. Now, we can make an argument that leadership is selfless. And I think great leaders would say it is largely selfless. They're serving the best of the person or persons who they're working with and in relationship with. We need not to language in love, but for me, that type of transmission or lesson in leadership came through the language of love. Whether it was through cooking or whether it was my basketball coach getting on my case because I was acting up outside of school, whether it was my mother spanking my butt, or whether it was my mother, telling me why I was valuable, or whoever it was that was telling me that I was valuable. And where do we learn where we're valuable from? In your book, it talks a lot about self-esteem, and we got to think, where's our sense of self, our sense of what is possible, our sense of confidence or lack thereof? Where do they come from? And in the West, it's easy to, in Western cultures, in the Western cultural tradition, it's easy to feel like I'm separate. And that's both the gift and the limitation of the West is the sense of unique self, the sense of an autonomous, powerful, unique self. But oftentimes we feel like we're alone or alienated. So part of this work in exploration of leadership in relationship, including the relational leadership model, is seeing how we can develop this sense of self that's always in relationship to others. And it's about understanding that relationship. So by pure, I simply mean the quality of presence on behalf of the giver is that of selfless love or selfless care or service. Even if it's only for a moment, that the intent is truly to serve the well-being of the others. And of course, as human beings, we are messy, and often our actions include our offerings, and often our actions, including our offerings as leaders, include a good dose of our unconsciousness, our shadow, our ego, but in my experience, we're also capable of truly selfless acts. The close relationship I have with my family has deepened over time, due primarily to our ability to communicate with heart and vulnerability. We do this in times of celebration and sorrow, as well as during life's more mundane moments. And as of late, I've been experiencing these mundane moments, mundane meaning earthly, every day, as precious. Sharing up a cup of coffee or a meal, taking a walk together, or joining somebody when they're on an errand or doing chores. While close connection to family is a cultural norm for us, as is finding the smallest reason to eat and celebrate together, I realize that this precious ordinary stems from the quality of intimacy that has been cultivated over years of us being willingness to work through our challenges and wounding. We've learned to bear witness to some of these challenges, including those that are passed down for generations, and then collectively engage in their resolution. And again, my formative understandings of a relationship to other, of service, of leadership, comes from a lot from family. It doesn't come entirely family, but when I think about leadership and understanding myself as really, really intimate and nuanced, a lot of these core or foundational lessons come from those family dynamics. Like most families, or if not all families, or all cultures and all communities, there's always some gift and there's always some limitation or deep shadow or deep pain that comes with all cultures, all communities, all relationships, all of them. And I think by intimate, we come to realize that that we come as leaders to embrace that which is exciting, that which inspires us, and then we also come to realize that we have to engage that which is shadowy, that which is frightening, that which is dark, right? There's a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Vietnamese monk who inspired Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he said, "If you look deeply into the palm of your hand, you will see your parents and all generations of your ancestors. All of them are alive in this moment. Each is present in your body. You are the continuation of each of these people." So basically what he's saying is, he might be being literal. He's a monk, and one of the people who's really started off the language or the trend of sacred activism. He might be very literal. He might be able to look at his hand and look and see generations in his family within his own hand. Or he might be speaking in metaphor, as leaders often do. And he's basically saying what I've been suggesting or intimating this whole time is that we're separate. Right? We're separate, but we're also part of a lineage or legacy of community and culture. Right? That if we think about and we think about it we can think about it physically, because that's how we're oriented in the West. Oh, where did I get my hair from? Where did I get my nose from? Where did I inherit, these types of, parts of my body from? We can also think about it in terms of traits. Like one of the gifts from my family culture is our love for chocolate and sugar. And that's part of the reason why I'm probably missing so many teeth. Right? So the gift of that culture, that family culture, that family practice, is celebration with lots of chocolate. Right? The shadowy version of it is that there's a lineage or legacy of diabetes. And then part of the reason why we take chocolate is it's self-medicating, and so we can avoid things that are painful, which is why we self-medicate by drugs, alcohol, food, sex, etc. Right? There's a gift and shadow within every culture. It just says it's there as an individual and collective sense of self in every culture. So, understanding our selfie. So I was looking for images And of course I chose mine because I'm narcissistic and very much into myself, as it was appropriate for, I think, the last few generations back to the boomers, who were called the me generation. But when we think about the selfie in a lot of ways, good, people are waking up. When we think about the selfie, we're really seeing ourselves as part of multiple communities, or imagining ourselves as being part of multiple communities, cultures, right? So it's interesting we use the language of self. This is me. But is it just me? I mean, sometimes it's me, right? But sometimes it's me in relationship to we, right? That there's a community either aside of you or behind you that you're representing. Does that make sense? And I think as leaders, we learn to recognize what are the multiple communities and cultures that we're a part of. At the very least, an awareness that we come from multiple communities of cultures and perspectives, right? And so for the first one, I don't have a pointer, but the far left is me and my cousins, so that's my family culture, of course in a bar. The second one is me and a partner enjoying a late night donut after the bar. There's a theme here. The one over here is when the hub just started here at Sonoma State, so it's me a part of work culture, work community, right? It's also there's a number of community artists there. Okay, me below, this is a men's group that does a lot of work around philosophy that I'm a part of, right? And this picture is with a public intellectual named Cornel West, whose ideas have inspired me, inspired a number of people in this country. And so when we look at it, so the question of who am I, in understanding myself, like, well, myself is different in different cultural contexts. Right here, I'm cousin Mark, I'm cousin Reiko, who could talk a lot of shit and then buy you a drink, right? Over here, something similar, but it's also the place is important. So our relationship, our sense of self isn't only defined in relationship to our bodies and our relationship to others, it's also defined in part in our relationship to place, right? So if I say who's from Southern California, raise your hand. There you go. Who's from Northern California, raise your hand. Right, so you already have some sense of regional culture, regional identity. If I say if you're from Southern California, you use the word the before the freeway, take the 5 to the 10. That's something that largely is a Southern California regional cultural practice. In the Bay Area, in Northern California, we don't do that ridiculousness. Not that I'm biased in my regional culture, right? But the picture of me eating the sprinkled donut that's making everybody hungry is a picture of one of the best donut places in Sacramento. It's called Maria's Donut. There's a history of people going there late at nights. And so there's a relationship, that I want to share with people. Not just because I like donuts, because I love Maria's and Sacramento, right? That's part of who I am. All right, my relationship to work, right? And again, cousin, partner, or Sacramentan, director of the hub, artist, intellectual, wannabe intellectual, our roles change and the way in which we see ourselves change in different cultural contexts. Does that make sense? That's good. All right. So I want to do a little bit of a dyad here really quickly. And in understanding yourself, that knowing that we come from multiple communities, cultures, and we have multiple identities, I'm going to ask you to consider 4 questions. I want you to, and I'll lead you in this shortly. What community and culture are you representing? What are some of the gifts or strengths of that community and culture? What are some of the challenges, shadows, or limitations of that community and culture? And then finally, how have these gifts and shadows influenced who you are, your identity, and what you do? So for example, I'm a huge, and please don't make fun of me, I'm a huge Sacramento Kings fan. Yes, thank you. They just traded the best player away, and it really sucks. But, I've been a huge fan, and so part of my identity, part of who I am in a cultural context is the Sacramento Kings fan, right? And there's a culture behind that. If I say Boogie Cousins or I say the 2002 Lakers, there's a cultural context for understanding what that is, Okay? And so one of the gifts of that is that I've been able to share that experience, that connection, that excitement of being a basketball fan with family members. Right? So there's a picture of me and my brother at a game, there's a picture of me and my boy at a game. And so the gifts that come from being part of that culture or community is that there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of cohesion, there's a lot of celebration. Some of the challenges or shadows of being in that community or culture, and this is one that I'm a bit embarrassed to say, but I'll share it with you because I think when we know ourselves, becoming intimate with the parts of ourselves that are a little darker and then sharing it so that we can work on it are instrumental or integral to becoming a really powerful leader, or at least an honest leader. I was at a game with my brother, that game on the left, and there was somebody who was yelling and cursing the whole time behind us, just making it, I mean, there's one thing to be able to yell and cheer, but there's another thing to be able to do it and you're cursing and there's children around over and over and over again, and he's not hushing up. And so I threatened him. I threatened him quietly. I'm not, I told him, I turned to my brother and I said, I hope this guy quiets out, I'm gonna have to kick his ass. Right? And as soon as I said it, I felt deeply, deeply ashamed. Right? Because I'm like, I don't know this guy at all. And he was ruining a lot of things for a lot of people. But when you're in a sports culture, when you're in a culture where there's a lot of energy and a lot of aggression, that sometimes impacts our identities, our sense of self, and our behavior. And for a split moment, that energy and that culture came through as, I'm going to kick this guy's ass because he's impeding the learning and the enjoyment of so many people. And of course I didn't, and I felt fortunate that he got quiet. But it's something that I recognize that is a shallow part of that environment. All right? That makes sense? A little bit? People cluing in on the gifts and shadows here? All right. So let's take just take 3 minutes, all right? And I want you to pair up with somebody with you. But first, I want you first to close your eyes before you pair up. And think of you as representing some community or culture. That could be a family culture, that could be a culture based on your gender or your race, it could be a culture based on your favorite sports team or a hobby, it could be your Harry Potter culture, but you're representing some culture or community, right? And you can actually even feel that community behind you. So actually kind of get that sense of a selfie, but an embodied selfie of this community that you're representing behind you, right? And feel into that, like lean into them. They got you back, you're back, and you're part of them. And then ask yourself, what are some of the gifts or strengths of that community, of this community that you identify with? And what are some of the challenges, shadows, or limitations of that community? And then finally, how have these gifts and shadows influenced who you are, your identity, and what you do? So gifts and shadows and community, those are the main ones. You ready to open your eyes? And then pair up with the person next to you, introduce yourself to them, right? And then share. What community or culture are you representing? And the rest of the question. We'll just take just 3 to 5 minutes. So let me ask the question, after doing this exercise, and we have just a few more minutes left, how might this be useful to you in understanding leadership and understanding yourself? Let's have a little bit of a conversation in the last 10 minutes or so. Tell me your name, please. Tell us your name.
Natalie. So I think this is useful because I feel this is a way that you can sort of identify yourself, but also realize that there's many other people who identify themselves in different ways, and there's not one identity that you can follow. So I think it's great to be able to recognize yourself and people around you.
Thank you. Tell us your name. Tell us your name, please.
I repeat something she said. Sorry.
It's okay. Just speak up and tell us your name first, okay, so we all can hear.
Hello, I'm Jacob. And I feel like having a better sense of self would make you like a stronger leader, like come across as more confident, and develop like your communication skills. So that's like what I was thinking of this entire presentation.
Good, thank you.
I'm Lauren. I feel like understanding the community and like where you came from is definitely like giving you a better sense of self as well. Like the person who I am is totally shaped by my family and like my friends and every like community and culture that I came from. And you also like learn a lot of things from those people. So as a leader, you learn from your mistakes, from your past, and I feel like that's a little better in general.
Good. Some of the folks from the back. Some from the back. There's some wisdom in the back of the field.
I feel like it's really helpful. I feel like it's really helpful because it helps you understand yourself and where you're coming from and where your beliefs come from. And you kind of have some kind of a base to your, a kind of a base to like yourself. There's something where you like understand it from to build foundations of your beliefs and things.
Yeah. Thank you. What's your name?
Alexandra.
Thank you. Maybe somebody from down here. Anybody else?
My name's Jacob. I think that you have to love yourself in order to love others. I think once you find yourself and love yourself, it makes it much easier to open up to others and see what they have to offer. Not just your point of view, but their point of view too.
What are some practices of self-love that you're aware of? I agree with you. I mean, I definitely agree with you.
I just think giving rather than receiving, just going to putting yourself out there, going to functions that to feed the hungry or feed people less fortunate than you, giving yourself to community in a way that only you can do that.
Yeah, one of the things that I see, thank you. One of the things that I see the most happen with student leaders, who are working in Res Life or who are working, in student activities or as activists or in associated students or doing work in the community. What I see over and over again, and not just with students, but what I see with colleagues and people who are professionals, activists and organizers and corporate heads, is that there's a tendency to want to serve the community and not take care of oneself. Right? So, and these are basic things, of course. It's not being intimate enough with your body to know what it needs. Oh, I skipped breakfast, but that's because I have this, because I have something to do. Right? Or I don't need enough sleep. And it's something interesting about the culture of endurance. Like, in university, there's something, I had an all-nighter, which is kind of like a badge of honor. It's like, that sucks. Like, sometimes we have to really, really push through, but all-nighters means that you're not getting enough sleep. Your body's not recharging. So there's something about the notion of self-love that becomes a real important consideration, if not a critical practice, to well-being, to leadership. So thank you for naming that. How many minutes? How we doing? I don't want to go. I'm always conscious about going over. 4 minutes? So we saw Northern California. We saw Southern California. How many people are fans of Star Wars? Raise your hand. And, how many people consider themselves artistic? Raise your hand. Thank you. Down really quick. How many people consider themselves Harry Potter fans? Raise your hand. Excellent. How many people are from another country? Raise your hand. Good. How many people is their race or ethnicity especially important to them? Raise their hand. How many people are on scholarships? Raise your hand. Or on financial aid? Raise your hand. How many people are aware of their gender when they go for a walk? Raise your hand. How many people here have faith or religious? Big part of who they are. Okay, good. So just in this brief, minute of raising our hands, we see that, your sense of you are the embodiment of multiple cultures, communities, and identities that intersect, change, and evolve. Right? So there is a culture behind sports, there's a culture behind region, there's a culture and a community behind books and sports culture around movies. There's a culture and a community around race, ethnicity, around class, around gender, around sexuality. Right? We're not one thing. Right? And some of these things are these identities. Some of these identities may shift or change or be fluid over time as we change. If I'm going to my men's group, if I'm going to my men's group where we're studying a certain type of philosophy, my identity as a Filipino American is not really on blast there. And quite honestly, with the exception of Sam, who's married to a Filipino there, their understanding of that cultural identity is probably not that strong. But it doesn't mean that I'm not informed by my Filipino culture and identity, as you saw it come out and how I framed this conversation in the first place. It's formative in terms of how I understand myself. But this wasn't a lecture on Filipino identity primarily, but it informed what I offered. So the idea is that, you know, who you are continues to evolve, but what leaders do is they're able to be aware of who they are and the different identities and communities that they're working with. And then the attempt is to learn how to work with those different identities and cultures. And I know next week or in the next couple of weeks, you're going to talk about working with others or understanding others. And so hopefully this is a good enough foundation into that. One question or two questions? Or should we close? Thank you, folks. And come to the hub in the city center.